Summary of The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. In The Crying of Lot 49, Edupa, a disgruntled housewife who lives in the made-up Northern California suburb of Kinneret among the pines, tries to find out what happened to her dead ex-boyfriend Pierce in Veracity. As she does this, she starts to learn about a huge plot by a group of rogue mail carriers called Trastero. At the start of the book, Edupa gets a letter from Verarity's lawyer, Metzger. In the letter, Metzger says that Verarity has died and chose Edupa to carry out his last wishes. Verarity was a rich businessman who almost bought the huge, soulless Los Angeles suburb of San Narciso. He left behind a huge estate of investments and real estate holdings. Edupa is confused. The last time she talked to Pierce was a year ago, when he called for a short time, said hello in a bunch of strange languages, and then hung up. Wendell Mucho Mas, Edupa's husband, comes home from his job as a DJ at the KCUF radio station and starts to whine. Edupa is upset, so she thinks about how much more Mucho hated his old job as a used car dealer. Dr. Hilarious, Edupa's doctor, calls her in the middle of the night to ask her to take psychedelic drugs as part of an experiment. She says no. Roseman, Edupa's lawyer, talks to her about the will in the morning. Edupa thinks about how alone she feels in her boring marriage and life in the suburbs. She feels like Rapunzel, who was stuck in a tower and couldn't get out. Edupa heads south to San Narciso, where she gets a room at the Echo Courts, a rundown motel. Metzger, Verarity's lawyer and a former child star who is very beautiful, shows up in her room without warning. Metzger's old movie Courier'S is about a man who takes his young son and dog to fight in World War I. Edupa and Metzger start drinking and watch the movie. Local ads talk about some of Verarity's strange businesses, such as Fangosa Lagoons, a neighborhood with canals built just for scuba divers, and Beaconsfield cigarettes, which have filters made of bone charcoal. Metzger tries to get Edupa to guess how the movie will end, but the movie starts to play out of order. They start chatting, and Metzger starts a game in which Edupa slowly takes off her clothes. Then Edupa goes to the bathroom, where she knocks over a can of aerosol hairspray, sending it flying around and breaking the mirror. Then, Edupa and Metzger have sex while the motel boss, Miles, plays music outside with his Beatles-like band, the Paranoids. Just as Metzger and Edupa reach their climax, the power goes out at the motel. When the light comes back on, they go back to Courier'S, where the main characters die, just as Edupa said they would. Metzger says that Verarity thought it wouldn't be easy to sleep with Edupa. This makes her cry. After this, Edupa starts looking into the strange Trastero system, which quickly becomes her main focus. She meets the rebellious engineer Mike Fallopian at a bar called The Scope. Mike works for the weapons company Yoyodyne, but in his spare time he is building a secret mail system. Edupa finds a strange message in the bathroom. It has a sign that looks like a trumpet and talks about a communication system called Waste. Metzger, Edupa, and the Paranoids go to Fangosa Lagoons, where they steal a boat and meet Manny Di Presso, a lawyer-turned-actor who played Metzger in a short TV show that didn't get picked up. Tony Jaguar, a member of the Mafia, is after Di Presso. Jaguar is also suing Pierce in Verarity's estate. During World War II, some Nazis killed a group of American soldiers in Italy and dumped their bodies in the Lago di Pieta. Then, Tony dug up the bones and sold them to Beaconsfield to make bone charcoal cigarettes, but he never got paid. The Paranoids say that this is just like the plot of the Courier'S Tragedy, an English play from the 17th century that Edupa plans to go see. The Courier'S Tragedy is about the rivalry between the duchies of Squamuglia and Fagio in early modern Italy. The story is full of torture, incest, and plans for revenge. At the end of the play, masked men attack Nickel, the heir to Fagio's throne, who is hiding as an employee of the Thurn and Taxis Mail Company. Angelo, Duke of Squamuglia, writes in a letter that he killed Fagio's men, threw their bones in a lake, and then dug them up and used them to make ink for his letters. Edupa thinks that the awkward silences in the play must mean something. Gennaro is one of the characters who talks about Nickel's tryst with Trastero. Randolph Droblet, who played Gennaro and directed the play, is approached by Edupa after the play is over. But Droblet tells Edupa that the play isn't literature and doesn't mean anything, he just found the script in Zapp's used books. Edupa finds out more about Trastero when she sees an engineer named Stanley Kotex drawing the trumpet sound she saw at the scope at the Yoyodyne offices. Kotex tells her that a rogue expert named John Nefastus made a secret machine. At Zapp's used books later, Edupa notices that Gennaro's line about Trastero is not in the plot for the Courier's Tragedy. She meets an old man named Mr. Thoth, who shows her a ring with a trumpet sign that his racist frontiersman grandfather stole from a mail-carrying bandit. And Genghis Cohen, a stamp expert, tells Edupa that many of Pierce's stamps are complicated fakes marked with a signal that looks like a muted trumpet. This is a change from the original Thurn and Taxis post-horn logo. Next, Edupa goes to Berkeley to see the publisher of the Courier's Tragedy and the engineer John Nefastus. The Trastero line is also not in the older version from the same publisher. Nefastus tells Edupa to look at his machine until it moves after he goes on a rant about entropy. But nothing happens after an hour. Edupa gets hit on by Nefastus, so she runs away and drives to San Francisco. Edupa realizes that Trastero could be a plot that has been going on for hundreds of years, or it could be something she made up. But the next day, she keeps seeing the sign of a muted horn everywhere. In a gay bar, she sees it on a man's lapel pin. The man tells her that it stands for Innamorati Anonymous, a group of people who choose to be alone because they think love is a dangerous addiction that needs to be fixed. Edupa sees the sign all over the city as she walks around and takes the bus all night. She sees it in shop windows, dreams, children's songs, pavement graffiti, and other places. She runs into an old friend, the Mexican rebel Jessa Rabel, who thinks that inverarity is the personification of evil. And in the morning, Oedipus meets an old drunken sailor with a horn tattoo who asks him to send a letter to his ex-wife through a WASTE box under a bridge. Edupa follows the messenger who brings the WASTE mail back to John Nefastus's house in Berkeley. The next day, Edupa chooses to ask Dr. Hilarius for advice. When she gets there, she finds him locked in his office with a gun, trying to fight off Israeli soldiers who aren't there. Hilarius says he used to be a Nazi and that he no longer believes in Freudian psychotherapy. The cops catch him, and when Edupa goes outside, she meets Mucho. Mucho talks to her uncomfortably for the radio, but gives her the name Edna Mosh. Caesar Funch, who is Mucho's boss, says that Mucho is losing his identity. Mucho can't tell one person from another because he's on Dr. Hilarius's experimental LSD. When Edupa goes back to San Narciso, she finds out that Metzger left with a younger woman. Professor Emery Bortz wrote the opening to the Courier's Tragedy. Edupa goes to see him. She sees that Zapp's used books has burned down as she walks by. When Bortz is drunk, he makes fun of her for asking about the different forms of the play. He then tells her that Droblet, the director of the local production, recently killed herself. Bortz says that the Trastero line was only in a pornographic version of the play written by a Puritan group called the Skirvamites. However, there is other proof that Trastero existed, such as the travel journals of the English Dr. Diocletian Blob. Bortz says that in the 1500s, a Spanish man called Hernando Joaquín de Trastero y Calavera said he was the rightful heir to the Thurn and Taxis postal empire. Hernando then started a rival company to get back at Thurn and Taxis. Bortz thinks that Trastero might still be around and might have been there during the French Revolution. Mike Fallopian thinks that Inverarity made up the Trastero plot to confuse Edupa, but Edupa is no longer interested in it. While Genghis Cohen finds new hints in Inverarity's stamps, Edupa figures out that Pierce owned everything, from Zapp's used books to the college where Professor Bortz teaches. Edupa gets sick and starts to drink a lot. She calls the Innamorati Anonymous man from San Francisco and wonders how Inverarity's wealth can cohabit with poverty and desperation in America. She comes to the conclusion that all she can do is wait for a miracle to break the system. In the end, Edupa goes to the sale where Inverarity's stamps, which are lot number 49, will be sold. Genghis Cohen says that a hidden buyer, who might be from Trastero, signed up at the last minute to bid. Also, a well-known auctioneer will be crying, or selling off the things. Edupa sits in the back of the bidding hall, looking for the secret bidder and waiting for the crying of lot 49.
About the author. Thomas Pynchon is known for not being open about his personal life. In more than 50 years, he has never given an interview, talked openly about his past, or given permission for his photo to be released. But this hasn't stopped critics and media from putting together a picture of his life. Pynchon was born on Long Island to a family with elite roots that go back to the 1630s in Massachusetts. Pynchon finished high school at 16 and briefly studied engineering physics at Cornell University before joining the U.S. Navy for a short time. His childhood was said to have been hard and full of family fights. When he got back to Cornell, he changed his major to English, started writing short stories about his time in the Navy, and even tried his hand at writing opera libretti. In the early 1960s, he slept on friends' couches in New York for a while until he got a job with Boeing in Seattle as an expert writer for a project about missile technology. When Pynchon's first book, V, came out in 1963, he quit his job at Boeing and moved to Mexico City. He then moved to Los Angeles, where he stayed until the early 1970s. Pynchon won a lot of attention and the National Book Award in 1974 for his groundbreaking book Gravity's Rainbow, which was highly influenced by his time at Boeing. Pynchon didn't want to go to the event, so he sent comedian Irwin Corey instead. Pynchon didn't write much over the next 10 years. During this time, he lived on the road a lot, and the media speculated a lot about who he was and where he was. One reporter even tried to find him in an isolated shack in the Northern California woods. Soon after getting a Genius Grant from MacArthur in 1988, however, Pynchon married his literary agent Melanie Jackson and moved to New York City's Upper West Side, where he is said to still live and hang out with friends and other writers a lot.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.